Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we're back over here at the Windy City because I think it's time we built a storage system over here. And what better time to take advantage of the storage capabilities of the new Copper Golem, a mob which can basically sort items for you from copper chests into regular ones. And boy, do I have a lot of shulker boxes around here that could really use some sorting. Whenever I've undertaken a project over here, basically whenever I've done anything in the Windy City, I have had shulker boxes not too far away. And they're just kind of full of a variety of junk that I was using to build different stuff. Some of it is for the town layout, most of which I'm probably going to scrap at this point because I have a better idea of the scale I want to build at. But some of it is for the builds we've done here already, like this big gateway, some of the fans that I was working on, the ghast garages, these townhouses, and of course some of the stuff that I was just getting from the landscape. Also, a ton of music discs these days because of course we have the record farm over there. So basically I want Copper Golems to be able to sort the majority of this, and I think it's also a good time to take a look at how we can sort stuff slightly differently to how we've done it over at spawn. But when I plan a storage system for an area, I usually start fairly soon because I want to make sure that I've got a central hub that I can work from. And that's really the key to it, really. I want this to be fairly central. So I thought, what better place to have this than attached to our ghast garages here, actually above where the train station is going to be, or as part of the train station. This walkway here seems like a great place to have it. It's nice and close to my central nether portal, and we're going to be building the town all around this, so resources are never going to be too far away. So this shulker box actually has a bunch of the supplies that I want to put into today's mechanism, because we are going to be building filtered storage as we have done before, but we're also going to be letting some copper golems help us filter out all of the miscellaneous odds and ends that you get from crafting stuff with wood. Outside of that, the categories are going to revolve a little bit more around color than anything else. It's going to be kind of color sorted storage rather than material sorted storage, but you can basically use the same techniques for more or less anything. But we're going to need the usual amount of stuff like redstone comparators, repeaters, torches, and redstone dust. We are also going to need plenty of hoppers and chests. And I brought a bunch of wood with me, but of course down here by where I was building these townhouses, we also have wood of every single type and a few different products of each of these wood types that needs sorting. So this is probably going to be one of our first tests, but I'm going to bring all of this wood with me because we're going to set up storage for the wood first. I really want to align this storage building with the center of the nether portal since it's all going to be part of the central train station, so it makes sense for there to be a bit of alignment here, a bit of symmetry. And the key to this system is going to be storing things in rows of 8. Back in the storage system at spawn, I have rows of 16 chests, all filtering different types of material, but since the Copper Golem has a maximum amount of 10 chests that it checks before depositing items, I think it's probably going to be worth sticking to 8 as a number. That way, it has a little bit of headroom, so that if we want to add a chest in here and there, it's not going to be breaking the Copper Golem and preventing us from auto-sorting some stuff. I'm also trying my best to make sure that the circuitry that's going to filter the items here doesn't end up overlapping, so I might end up adjusting the proportions of this a little bit, but right now we have 8 sets of double chests on either side. The hopper is going to make sure that the contents of this one filter down into that one, and that means we're going to have over 100 inventory slots for each slice of the filter here, which should mostly be for logs in this case. So we're going to have 6 wood types on one side, 4 wood types and the 2 nether stems on the other side, and then the other 2 chests on each row are going to be filled up with temporary items for now. We won't worry too much about those, just in case Minecraft decides to add some additional wood types in future. That way, we have a little bit of redundancy in here. We have some stuff where we know we can just expand this very, very easily. Now, the rest of this is going to look very familiar to those of you who've already built automated storage. I do have a tutorial earlier in the series about this part of it, so go ahead and watch that if you're not sure how to set up storage filter slices, because I'm just going to be doing that for each of these chests, and from there, we'll get onto how the Copper Golem comes into the mix. Okay, I've got my storage filters basically set up. I haven't started putting items in here yet, but the redstone is all ready to go. We've got our comparators, repeaters, and redstone torches down there locking the hoppers until we have enough items flowing through the filters. Now I want to add the element of this circuit that is going to allow the Copper Golem to sort stuff into barrels hanging above some of this stuff, similar to how we have it in the storage system back at spawn. A barrel is going to be about there, or maybe a block higher, but kind of tilted downwards to the player to indicate that there are items in there, and then that's going to store all of the miscellaneous components that you can make out of different types of wood. And that's going to be made possible by the Copper Golem, which we can use as a really easily constructed multi-item storage filter. Here's how it's going to work. We're going to have a barrel that will be our output. So naturally, we're going to want to have a hopper facing into that barrel. We need a redstone torch to lock the hopper feeding into that barrel, and we'll need a chest over the top of this that the Copper Golem is going to sort the items into, because remember, they won't interact with stuff like barrels. They only interact with chests and copper chests. So measuring the contents of this chest, we're going to have a redstone comparator, and we're going to have 2 redstone dust linking the comparator to that torch, which means every time the comparator signal reaches 2, that will switch the torch off, allowing items through the hopper. Now here's the most important thing about this. When hoppers pull items out of chests, and when Copper Golems put items into chest, they always do that from the top left corner, go through the first row, and then the top left corner on the second row, and so on and so forth. Meaning that we can put a bunch of items down here, and those items, like these spruce planks for example, can act as the guide to show the Copper Golem what type of blocks to put in here, but it will always place them in the top left corner, even when there is not a complete stack of items in here. So I'm going to craft a few different variants of spruce wood. We're going to make some spruce slabs, of course, we're going to make a bunch of spruce planks, but we'll also make some fences and maybe some spruce trapdoors, because I use a lot of those for building with. And in the bottom row of this chest, we can establish what are essentially our key items, the items we want the Copper Golem to deposit in this chest so that they get pulled through the hopper into the barrel. And what you'll find pretty quickly is that you can store a lot of items down here in this lower section before the comparator signal reaches 2 and starts pulling items out. You'll need 3 stacks and 54 items. So I'm actually going to need to grab a bit more spruce wood for this. What I would recommend doing is making a stack of the cheapest items available to you. So of course slabs are going to be a big part of this. Buttons are also going to be a big part of this. We'll add a few trapdoors there, and there you go. You can start to see those items actually filtering down now. So let's say we take a few of these trapdoors out, since they're slightly more valuable. We'll add a few more planks back in, and there we go. That's now at the point where we have 3 stacks of items plus 54 additional items in there, and any items that get put in the chest now end up filtering through to the barrel. Of course, if you want to add any new items to this list, you can now just take one of the items out and add something new. Let's say, for example, I want to take out one of these spruce trapdoors, and I can add a barrel, and now the Copper Golem will be looking for barrels as well. We can do the same thing with spruce signs if I want to make sure that it carries all of the spruce signs to this chest as well. And naturally, stairs are going to be a part of this, doors are going to be a part of this. Okay, I think you get the picture at this point. We're putting all of the different variants of craftable spruce items in here as a key for the Copper Golem to find. Now, when I create my Copper Golem over here, I can put all of these different spruce items in its copper chest. It's going to search through all of that stuff, grab the first item, notice that it's a part of this chest, and when it drops the items in, that redstone circuit is going to activate, and those items are just going to drain out again. That means whatever ends up getting put in this chest is going to be sorted into this spruce storage. Now imagine several of these in one go, and the Copper Golem receives a bunch of different wooden items, like stairs and slabs of different wood types. The Copper Golem will move 16 items at a time, so it's really not taken long for it to sort through all of those planks. The sticks are coming up though, and that's where the Copper Golem is going to encounter a problem, because we haven't added sticks to this storage at all. So when it picks up the sticks, it's going to start looking for other chests in the vicinity where it can place the sticks, since they aren't part of our spruce filter, and that's where we're going to have an empty chest at the end of the line that's going to drop those items back down into a chest that can either be sorted manually by the player or could even be fed into the next line of automated storage. But as you can see, the redstone for this is remarkably simple. Before this, it took a lot of redstone to create a multi-item sorter. In this case, it's taken 2 pieces of redstone dust, a comparator, and a redstone torch. By the way, if you find a Copper Golem ever holding items that it doesn't have a place for, and it doesn't have a place to drop them off, you can simply right-click on them, and the Copper Golem will drop whatever item it is and go back to sorting whatever it finds in the copper chest. So our challenge at this stage in the game is to try and figure out how we can fit this Copper Golem item sorter into a one-wide space so that it tiles like the filters here do, to make sure that we can get every single circuit side by side, and also make sure that it doesn't interfere with the operation of this redstone circuit, because if any of the components above power any of the storage filters from below, they could end up breaking. Likewise, we don't want these hoppers to pull out anything that's intended for the copper golem to sort, and we don't want any of our components above to power the hoppers below and lock them. But fortunately, I've come up with a pretty neat solution for this. We're going to start by making sure we have a row of hoppers above this that's going to be the feed line for our storage system, because right now these are all just the individual filters. We need to make sure that there's a line of hoppers that are going to feed stuff in from an input chest, probably over here somewhere. There we go, our input chest can be somewhere over here, and we have this additional row of hoppers over the top of our storage filters. Those all feed into a block over here, which is going to be a dropper that will push the items up to a circuit above this where the copper golem is going to be sorting. And what we're going to build above this is essentially a miniature version of the storage filters we have here that's only going to require 2 redstone dust instead of 3, because once again, the copper golem is going to store a minimal amount of items in there. And the component that's lowest down in this circuit is the repeater that we've got on that stone block there. That's actually going to go on top of each of these hoppers. So we now have 8 repeaters all lined up on top of these hoppers above each of these chests, and either side of those we're going to place the spruce planks that are going to carry the redstone signal to and from the rest of the filter circuit. And this works exactly the same way that the item filter does. We have redstone torches along the top here. Those are going to be locking the hoppers above them. We need 2 blocks on top of each of these, and redstone dust is going to travel along each of these blocks like so, and the comparators are going to be set up here. Each of these comparators is going to be detecting a single chest. The single chest is important here just because of the space that we have, but there's a double chest version of this that we might build elsewhere. We're going to place our barrels adjacent to the redstone torches facing downwards like so. We're going to have a row of hoppers facing down into those barrels, and underneath each of these chests we're going to have a hopper facing into the hoppers that we just placed. And just in case any of the redstone explanation has been difficult for you folks to follow and you just want to take a look at the circuit itself, screenshot that, do whatever you need to do. There it is in its entirety. The top part is what's going to serve the copper golems. The bottom part is going to be bulk storage. So what we'll do is we'll place a bunch of items in a chest at the start of this hopper line. That's going to travel through the entire set of filtered storage, which is going to filter out all of the logs that make their way through the system. Any other wood items are going to be put into a dropper at the end here, and this dropper is going to have its own redstone clock circuit. That means anything that gets put in the dropper is going to be shot upwards in a water column. Actually, because the items are going to be traveling up by water stream, we need to make sure that the dropper is extended out here 1 more block so that the water column can be contained and doesn't flood the redstone. The copper golem is going to be contained up here inside of this glass box, and there's a couple of reasons to make it out of glass. One, so we can see what's happening inside of here, but also because solid blocks would cut off the redstone dust while glass doesn't. So the copper golem's chest is going to go right here. It will still be able to open these chests because glass blocks do not prevent mobs or players from opening chests. The water stream is going to flow up and over this hopper, which is going to feed items into the copper chest. For efficiency of movement, you might want to make this a soul sand bubble column. We need to make 1 more small circuit here, which is just to make sure that the dropper has a clock circuit that will make sure it ejects any items that it receives. Here's a simple dropper clock, comparator running into a block, redstone dust, block, redstone repeater, another piece of redstone dust wrapping back around into the comparator and also into this target block in front of it. I think it's finally time to program all these filters, make sure they've got 1 of each of the 6 wood types we want, and that the other filter is at least taken up with netherrack or something like that so that we can expand the filter later, and then we'll move the copper golem in and start programming the filters for the copper golem as well. Okay, so after a lot of work, we now have filters for the first 6 wood types. These are all of the, what I think of as the classic Minecraft wood types, the ones that were in the game when I started playing the game, which was a long time ago now. But anyway, we have those 6 all loaded in, and we have chests up here with all of the miscellaneous wood items that I could think of. And now, having done this, I can already think of a couple more, like the ones that are 6-sided bark blocks, for example. And I think there's a couple of other things I've missed in here. Hanging signs, for example, stuff like that. I will think of those as I go, and once again, all we need to do is remove a couple of slabs and then add one of those items in, and that should take care of it. Be wary of stuff like signs, though, because, of course, signs sometimes take up more than a single item's worth of space. You can only stack signs to 16, which means that they'll take up slightly more space, produce comparator signals slightly sooner. Of course, I've got 2 dark oak trapdoors in here, so I could put another slab in, take that trapdoor out, but either way, the exact proportions of items in here do not matter, as long as you have enough that when additional items go in here, it increases the comparator signal. The comparator signal will trigger the redstone torch to switch off, and then items will get filtered down into here. Now, if I put any item in here, it's going to disappear immediately, but I'm not going to be the one putting items in here. The Copper Golem is. And the Copper Golem is only going to be able to deposit items in these chests if it finds an item in there already, which means any of these that it adds to, it's going to sort those items hopefully perfectly. It is time to put that to the test though, because we have our copper chest up there, but we do not have a Copper Golem up there yet. So that's going to be as simple as shearing this pumpkin and then probably breaking the chest that it's standing on. Yes, there we go. All right. Now the Copper Golem will be in here. It'll search that copper chest for items. When it finds that there aren't any, it'll just idle for a little while before checking it again. But as soon as it receives an item in that chest, it's going to check through all of these chests to see whether or not the item can fit into any of these categories. The last two chests in the row are simply filled up with netherrack for now, and I will try my best not to put any netherrack into this system, because if I do, it's just going to end up in this chest. But with it completely filled out like this, there's no way the Copper Golem tries to put anything in here. Frankly, you could filter this with a single piece of netherrack. I just wanted to avoid anything else going wrong. Anyway, to properly put this to the test, I want to throw in an entire shulker box of different items like this. We're going to take the bundle out for now, because otherwise the Copper Golem will probably get stuck holding the bundle, but I'm just going to put my birch shulker box on top of this hopper. Items are going to start filtering through one at a time. Anything that isn't a birch log is going to get filtered up to the Copper Golem, and then theoretically the Copper Golem should sort all of the birch items into this barrel here. There's no time like the present. Let's give it a try. The birch shulker box will go on there. It'll start draining out, and you know what, just to speed some things along, I'm actually going to rearrange this ever so slightly and make sure that there are fewer logs in between us and the rest of those birch items. Just to check on our regular storage filters, we should now find that, yep, the birch logs are piling up in the bulk storage. That's wonderful. We'll add a couple of these stacks of logs to that as well. But pretty soon we should find that this dropper circuit starts clicking, and items should get shot up this water stream and end up in the copper chest ready to be sorted. Yep, there they go, and it's looking like we do need some soul sand after all. Now, it's a soul sand bubble column. We should have absolutely no problem with the items going in there. I just need to make sure that all of that stuff gets replaced in the shulker box, and we'll try again. There we go. The golem should now have a couple of items to sort. We're going to throw the planks and stuff in here as well, along with all of these slabs and signs and whatnot, and pretty soon the golem should be inundated with stuff, which I think is probably going to be a good stress test of the system. Now let's take a look at what the golem is doing. It's looking through each of these chests systematically for items to throw in there, and when it eventually finds the chest that contains the birch stuff, it's going to happily drop that stuff in there. But considering the amount of stuff we're likely to put in here, these odds and ends of wooden items, this double chest should be more than enough to hold all of the items we're likely to put in here, and that gives the copper golem time to sort through all of it. Once again, the key to this is to make sure that you leave some empty space at the top part of this chest, and it looks like, yep, some of those items are filtering through. We need to add a few more slabs, it looks like, but already we should find that there are items filtered down into this birch barrel. Yes, absolutely, we have stripped birch and birch planks in there already, and once the golem finds wherever to deposit the next set of planks, they're going to start filtering through as well. I'm going to give the slabs in the filter chest a quick top up to make sure that all of the planks should filter down from that corner. And that's it. Fantastic. So all of them should now be headed down into the barrel, and any other items that get put in this are going to head down into the barrel as well. And by the time that's all sorted, we should have all of the logs stored down here in bulk storage, and all of the crafted items above them in the barrel. One more important thing though, we need a fail-safe chest or an overflow chest of sorts. So I'm actually going to install a slightly longer walkway here to ensure that this is the last chest the copper golem checks. We're going to add our final double chest on top of here, and in theory, the copper golem should only ever open this chest if it has some items that don't fit into these first 8 chests, but it will detect that is there, and we can have a hopper that filters it down to something like an overflow chest for the entire system. In fact, I'm going to put that one on an angle like this so that the hoppers can be a little further out, and that way it stays separate from the system we use to load in items. So this is effectively the rejected chest, which could let us know, hey, this wooden item isn't stored in the system yet, or hey, this belongs to a different category, at which point we could collect the stuff the copper golem has put in the trash and deliver it to another part of the storage system. How's it doing with the birch items? Yeah, look at that. All of that stuff has collected in there, which seems like there's no problems with the system, which is excellent news. That means it's time to get the rest of this stuff sorted and start working on the other categories of items. Hey folks, welcome back. So I've now managed to decorate a bunch of this in addition to getting the other storage module on the opposite side up and running, and now all of those items have been sorted into their respective barrels by the Copper Golem. I've managed to empty out all of the shulker boxes that contained all of these different wood types. I still have a couple of miscellaneous things. I figured the honeycomb was going to be worth keeping around, but it's been going for long enough now that some of the lanterns have even oxidized a stage further. The copper chests up here are completely oxidized, but you'll notice the Copper Golems haven't really aged a day. The same is even true for the one down here, who has been toiling away since I built that example filter, and the Copper Golem still has not aged yet. And I wanted to build this kind of framework around the outside using one of my favorite wood gradients here, of course, and incorporating the shelf into the curve of this archway, which I think works exceptionally well, and also does a great deal to hide what's going on behind the scenes here. But we've got our labeling system nice and set up. We've got two netherrack blocks at either end of this, because of course we could always expand into other wood types in future. And around the corner, I've started going into a little bit of design stuff on the corners. We've got more shelves here as well, and I like the fact that these dark oak shelves kind of have this rivet texture in them almost, which looks like the copper texture to me. So that's part of the detail that ties the two of those things together, aside from also being quite a nice warm color set. Speaking of color sets, over here I have started on our next module of storage. I built this one a little while ago and haven't gotten around to installing the Copper Golems in it yet, but that's probably why the copper chests have already started to age. This is going to be colored storage for all of the different types of colored blocks, and to demonstrate what I'm planning on storing in here, I actually have a bundle over here with one of each of those items in it. And a bundle is a really great tool to have when you're dealing with these chest filters, because of course you've got a lot of different items, and that's going to take up a lot of space in your inventory unless you stash it all in a bundle where you can store a bunch of different items in a single inventory space. So I could store all of the key items for all 16 colors in my inventory and have room to spare. Bundles have been out for several updates. I've said enough about them at this point. The idea, of course, is that we add a bunch of these colored items to the bottom row of this chest, and there are going to be 9 different items. We go from dye, glass and stained glass, to red carpet and wool, of course. We want to have terracotta and glazed terracotta, and then of course concrete powder and concrete. And those are the 9 items I plan on storing in each of these different colored filter slices. There are of course a bunch of other items that are different colors which you could add to this. For example, I typically carry a lot of red beds around, so we could have red beds in here. We could have all of the different byproducts of these various colorful blocks. And all we would need to do is add those to the filter, and they could get filtered down into the red slice or the green slice or the purple slice of this storage filter setup. But the reason I'm sticking with these 9 items is because, horizontally speaking, chests have 9 slots of inventory. And every shape of chest has this, whether it is a small chest or a large chest, and so we can store the items in columns like this and guarantee that we can get 6 stacks of each of these items as the items filter down through these chests. The Copper Golem's just going to sort them, drop them off in that chest up there. The filter is going to do its work, and all of the items will end up down here. But if we leave 6 of each of these items in a column in the chest, then the stacks, when they filter through the hopper, are going to be added in there, and it's not just going to be a big jumble of every type of block sort of all over the place. It's going to be neatly sorted as though we auto-sorted it that way the entire time. And these filters are basically exactly the same as the filters over there, except I'm using a target block to redirect some redstone signal into them. They work on exactly the same principle, where the comparator signal strength needs to reach 2 to deactivate this redstone torch, which unlocks the hopper and allows items to flow into the system. But because none of these have a single bulk resource that I want to store in these chests below, I am just including the Copper Golem filter circuit here. I'm not including the standard item filter circuit. Any of those blank materials that you end up dyeing, we're just going to be storing them in a separate slice of the filter somewhere else. And of course, stuff like white wool is an exception because it's part of those 16 colors already. There isn't like a blank wool that you dye to get white. And we'll need enough items to make sure that anything the Copper Golem puts in these chests gets filtered through the hoppers. So of course, we'll need to put 3 stacks and 56 items, something like that, in that top chest. But of course, just to make sure we're covered, we've got to do that with every single color here. So I'm going to go and get those 9 items for each of the 16 colors. We'll work on that a little more, and then we'll start deciding the rest of the categories for our storage system. Okay, a short time later, here's an update for you. All of the golems and stuff aren't in quite yet because I still need to program some of the filters with all of the items, but I think I have the basic categories all marked out here. Once again, in sections of 8. Over here on the left, we have all of the different stone types. The only one I'm not entirely certain I want to leave in here is dripstone, because there's a dripstone cave down there where my beacon mine is. I'm getting a decent amount of dripstone through, but of course the only variant of that we have in the game as of this update is pointed dripstone, and just having one filter for dripstone blocks and the filter above only being pointed dripstone doesn't quite work for me. So I'm considering swapping that out for a different stone type, but I'm on the fence about which one that should be. Each of these others, though, of course, have a lot of different variants. There are stairs, slabs, walls, etc., etc. Of course, stone has things like stone bricks, and lots of that is going to go into the barrel. Chances are we might need to make that one of the extra filter slices instead of the dripstone, but we'll see. We'll see what exactly we need as the architecture of the Windy City continues to take shape. Obviously, tough is going to have a lot of the tough polished and brick variants in here. We're going to maybe require a little bit of extra storage for that elsewhere, because I have a lot of those from taking apart trial chambers. But the rest of these seem to make relatively decent amount of sense to me. And on the opposite side, we have stuff like grass and moss and the terraforming blocks we've been using, along with sand and gravel, which we'll need a lot of in bulk to make concrete. But of course, sandstone is going to go along with that, because I tend to gather sandstone separately to sand. I end up taking a lot of the sandstone out of deserts after I've stripped out the layers of sand. I don't tend to craft sand into sandstone, because I think the crafting recipe is abysmal, and you might as well just get the sandstone anyway. Bricks and terracotta obviously make a fair amount of sense, and I think the overstock for these, the barrels up there, could be used to store things like decorated pots, flower pots, bricks, that kind of thing. Still on the fence about what we're doing with the terracotta one of those. And you might wonder why grass and dirt are even here. Well, those are also going to take on some of the variants of those blocks. So coarse dirt and rooted dirt are just going to go above the dirt here, and grass is going to have podzol, mycelium, and potentially even some of the flowers, because I think there's no room in here for flowers necessarily, but if we wanted to filter all of them down into a single barrel, chances are a golem could do that for us very easily. We just have a ton of like rose bushes and sunflowers and stuff in there as the extra stock to fill up the filter, and then of course all of the other flowers could trickle down into this barrel. Finally, this little alley here has a few more interesting materials, a few more diverse ones, and these are all building materials chosen because they have variants. They've got the stairs and slabs and walls and that kind of thing, but they are certainly a little off the beaten path, but might end up being accent blocks for our city style here. Of course, we've got quartz, 2 of the different prismarines, because of course they're crafted differently. You can't turn one into the other. And dark prismarine is probably going to end up in the barrel above the prismarine bricks, because I tend to craft that as I go, because it requires ink, which is usually a little bit more difficult to acquire in larger quantities when I don't have a squid farm right now. And believe me, a squid farm is on the cards at some stage. Endstone, of course, has endstone bricks as a variant. Purple, we're not going to use too much, but I will have a decent amount of it. Likewise, we'll find a decent amount of room for resin. We have the resin farm up in the sky over there that I think I'll probably bring some of it down, smelt it into bricks at some sort of automatic furnace we'll build around here, and that way we'll have plenty of that if we want a really bright orange accent. Likewise, nether bricks and blackstone need to be represented here because they've got a lot of variants. The red nether bricks will end up getting stored in there, likewise all of the blackstone bricks, and so forth. On the opposite side here, I wanted to have some of the precious resources represented, and we're going to be acquiring stuff like copper blocks in bulk, thanks to the fact that I'm building a copper aging facility right now, or at least digging out the hole where one is going to go. It's going to be a little while before I get the building done, but I want to make sure that I have iron and redstone stored over here so I can access those at a moment's notice. I went through a lot of iron from the iron farm just to make all of the hoppers that went into this whole setup, but I will have plenty more iron in future. We might even build an iron farm somewhere over here to have one more local to us. And the redstone is going to be necessary for storing all of the redstone blocks that I'll eventually turn into redstone dust for the copper aging machine, but we'll also have redstone components stored in the barrel above. And then these last 2 slices of the filter, I'm not certain what to store here because the other precious resources didn't really apply. Like, I don't think the Windy City is going to be using a lot of diamond blocks or gold blocks or anything like that, and they actually craft precious few things. Most of the gold in the world I end up using for powered rails, so I don't really see the need to store gold, netherite, lapis, that kind of stuff over here. But if you have any inklings as to what I might be missing from any of these filters, some stuff that ideally has a bulk storage block and then a bunch of smaller things that it is crafted into, leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think I have missed out of these storage filters, because as of right now, I'm declaring this storage system basically feature complete. I just need to do a lot of decorating, and it'll all be decorated in a similar style to this, but I'll leave room for an upstairs and a downstairs. Of course, we have a pretty large area below this. I'll want access to the nether portal at some stage as well, so maybe a water elevator here that will get me down to the floor below. Obviously, all of this is going to be decorated from the outside to look like the train station that serves the Windy City, but I have a feeling we'll want to do a little bit of interior decoration and leave some room for manual storage, just on the off chance that I bring stuff to store here that I don't have as any of the filters. Okay, folks, we are at the stage where I'm just kind of tinkering with design ideas at this point, and so I thought we would wrap up the technical side of things with a look at what I've done to some of these item filters since you last saw this. So I've started to get some of the roofs on and everything, which means I'm pretty happy with most of these filters. I've left a couple of spots over here open because I wanted to show you something that occurred to me during the process of filling up some of these item filters, and that's that we don't want to leave too many of these items in the filter if we can. When it comes to these large-scale bulk storage filters, typically we leave 41 items in the filter because that is enough to prevent what's called overflow. These chests and the barrels that they feed into are really meant to be for the odds and ends of different crafted items that you get out of each of these types of materials, so it's rare that they will ever fill up to the point where you can't fit new items into the barrel. If that happens, you need to find some way of using the items that are in the barrel, because otherwise you're going to end up with the system overflowing and breaking the neighboring filters. And if we can find a way of getting as many of these items out of the chest as we can, that is to our advantage. So I figured out during this process that instead of leaving a stack of items that we actually want to filter through, we could just put an unstackable item like a wooden shovel in the filter, and that would make up all of the increase in comparator strength that we want to allow the items to start filtering through. And we're going to use this andesite chest here as an example. Right now, there is a stack and 59 items in this filter. What we want to do is take about a stack of these items out. So we got 59 slabs there. We can take maybe 5 more of the regular andesite slabs, and we can replace that with a wooden shovel that can just go on the end right there. And now when any items end up in the top left, they start draining down into the filter, because this wooden shovel here is doing the work of a full stack of items. But it's doing that incredibly cheaply. It's just 2 sticks and 1 piece of wood to make a wooden shovel, and that means that all of the andesite slabs that we would have had to have hanging around in the filter up here end up getting filtered down into the barrel where we have access to them and we get to use them. We're going to do exactly the same thing here with the diorite and the granite, which I had set up basically the same way. We're using the cheapest material to fill out the filter, but of course we don't need to be doing that if we can replace that with a wooden shovel that's just there to take up space. And we'll do exactly the same thing with these granite variant blocks as well. Make sure that there's some slabs in here, because of course if you were to put 2 shovels in here, everything else would start to drain out because the comparator signal would just be too high. There are fewer than a stack of items left, and that's the point at which you want to have a shovel in there. With those filters done, I'm going to fill up these gaps in the ceiling here, and that should be that section all taken care of. And I'll show you that over here, I've actually done the same thing with all of the colorful material as well. Only this time, because there are double chests, we can add additional wooden shovels, because we need 3 stacks worth of completely full inventory slots before we end up with the smaller amount of items that takes up the rest of it. And in this case, I've chosen red carpet because it's so easy to make. I have a ton of wool, and for the price of 2 wool, you get 3 carpets. So automatically, by spending the same amount of material, you're going to get more items to take up the inventory space. And throughout this entire process, I've just been keeping track of which are the cheapest items to do that with. For example, over here with the copper chests, I've got copper nuggets here because, of course, you can get 9 of those out of a single ingot, and that's very, very easy to take up space with compared to the other components that might be a little bit more valuable. On the opposite side here, where I've got quartz being filtered, I've used nether quartz instead of any of the blocks that are made out of it. And for the resin filter here, I'm using resin clumps instead of any of the resin bricks and stuff that I'm filtering. And you'll notice that once again, I've got wooden shovels in a lot of these filters. I do need to finish up the purple one because I don't have a great deal of purple variants and stuff out there. I need to farm that block in larger quantities, especially if we're going to use it to build around the Windy City. But I think it's nice to at least have some of those blocks blocks in supply here. And in any cases where I don't have any items to go in there yet, I've just placed one piece of netherrack in the item filter at the top where the copper golem is, and that should be enough to let the copper golem know nothing needs to get put in this chest, unless it gets fed any netherrack by accident, in which case it'll just store it there and it might make its way into the barrels eventually. But all in all, I am really happy with how this system turned out. I think it's fantastic. One last thing we need to do, though, is to introduce a little bit of wax to each of these copper golems, because none of them have fully aged yet, but they are getting to the point where they're starting to show the signs of a little wear and tear. This one here is one that I brought down from the demonstration area down there, and I brought it up to the storage system, so that's probably the oldest one out of all of them. They should take roughly about 24 in-game hours, maybe slightly less than that, maybe like 22 or so, to fully age from fresh all the way down into oxidized and then freeze in place. So it takes a lot of actual real time of the copper golems being loaded for them to change at all. But still, we don't want them to age and end up freezing up here and break our storage system that way. So, of course, I'm going to give them a tap with an axe, and I'm going to honeycomb them to make sure they are waxed. And that will make certain that they never end up aging past that first stage. If you prefer, for the aesthetics, you can always freeze them in whatever other state you find them, but remember that if they are fully oxidized, there's a chance that they will freeze up unless they are waxed before that happens. I'm not going to bother waxing the chests, though that has absolutely no effect on the copper golem's productivity, so I'm not going to pay it any mind. We have one copper golem missing from this area over here, and that's where I brought over an oxidized copper golem statue from spawn, where I can just place this one in, tap it with an axe a few times, and revive it by right-clicking one final time. Turns out you don't crouch to do that, which is kind of interesting. But either way, we're going to honeycomb that one as well. It's already found the copper chest, which means it's going to get to work filtering out anything that goes in here, which is not much right now. I made a massive filter of flower items over here, including the mycelium podzol and mud that I figured might be useful to have filtered into the grass chest, but you probably don't want this many items going into a single barrel if this is how you're filtering items, because with a couple of stacks of each of those, that's when you start to get those issues with overflows. So I doubt we're going to keep too many flowers in here in general, but it's worth having a category like that. I need to figure out the aesthetics of things a little bit, figure out where I want these final output chests to go in case the copper golems reject any items that they're supposed to be filtering if they can't find a spot for them. And I've got a couple of things like over here where I've got a couple of almost like wooden boards hiding stuff like the hoppers, using trapdoors to hide some stuff like that and to blend the overall aesthetics. But I'm considering using something like these shelves, but with lettering in the form of banners, because you can make a pretty convincing set of letters on banners, and I think it'd be great to have a shelf here pointing to this chest and saying input or in over here, and then output or just out in front of this one to illustrate that this is the chest that the copper golems are going to reject the items if they can't find a place to filter them, and this is where you put the items in, just so I don't lose track of that stuff if I end up leaving this project for a while and coming back to it. Anyway, that about does it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. Tune in to future episodes where I will be decorating a little bit more of this and working on other projects around the Windy City, but so far, the copper golems are proving a valuable ally, and I hope this has given you some spark of interest in using them in your own worlds. For now, thank you so much for watching. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care, bye for now.